to Exploring Santa Cruz, a biweekly program on KSQD 90.7 FM. I'm your host, Mathilde Rand, and my guest is Tim Fitzmaurice. Tim Fitzmaurice is a poet and a teacher at UCSC and at Salinas Valley State Prison. He lives in Santa Cruz with Lori Brooks and their dog, Samuel Beckett, and cat, Willie Mays. He's a former mayor and involved in other political actions and union work. He recently joined the board and community advisory board of K-Squid. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Matilda. It's a pleasure being here.
Absolutely. Now, could you expand a little bit on your poetic endeavors?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me because this is kind of a momentous time in my life because I just published a book of poems and I'm hoping to publish more, but it's just a time for me to come forward and talk about something I've been working on since I was a teenager. And now I'm not a teenager anymore, that's for sure. And so it was about time to put out some of these poems. You know, my endeavors in poetry have gone on now to try to encompass writing about our community, trying to pay attention to where I live. And I've really enjoyed sort of finding new things about it. So Exploring Santa Cruz is the right place to be for me right now.
Since you talked about your book, The Things We Take With Us, I was wondering, because I found this heartwarming and life-affirming advice for all of us, would you mind reading your poem, Pick Up Your Things?
Yeah, Pick Up Your Things was an important poem for me. I read it at graduation at UCSC when I was given the opportunity to give the commencement address a couple of times. And it has that quality, but the quality also is based on the fact that I love Simone Weil, or however you pronounce her name, and she said once, human beings know that if you want something to be off the ground and on the table, you're just going to have to lift it. And that was like a remarkable thing for me to read, and so I ended up writing this poem really based on reading Simone Weil.
Looking forward to it. Go ahead.
Pick up your things. Love is not a destination, but a direction and an exhausting climb. To be human is to lift whatever has fallen, to pick up your things. Like your mother said, your father said, pick up your things. They are only saying, be everything, move everything, be everything humanly possible. Love is a direction and the energy to move everything in that loving direction, and not to be astonished, frozen, because you are not there yet. Do not be paralyzed by fear. Don't be anesthetized by the ordinary poisons of the world. The world is full of those darts that they use to put tigers to sleep. If you are stuck, your feet buried up to the ankles, up to your knees, lift them. Love is a direction, so love yourself and others and the world. Forgive what you can and lift your feet. And when you see something or someone who has fallen, lift them. These are your things. Pick up your things.
When I read that, it really meant a lot for me because, especially during COVID time, it was so difficult. We need to lift that. I told myself, you need to lift up. So when I read this poem, this is for me. Lift yourself up.
Thank you.
Get out of the funk from being at home the whole time, but also go out in the community and look around and see what needs to be done.
All right, living is doing, and it's what we do that makes the most difference of all. We sit home and think, and people are distracting us from doing all the time, online or television or whatever it is that distracts us. Living is going out and doing. It could be gardening, or it could be working in prison, or it could be anything that has to do with what I see as service. And service is crucial to my life. It's crucial to the way I've improved my life. I went through some depressions and things and had some reversals, and I needed to learn that service was a way to get outside of my own head and to do things in the world.
I couldn't agree more with you. In the book, you write many poems about people in our community, political friends and students, and you also mentioned that in the outro. Why? What's the importance to you?
When I go into prison, I tell people the topic of your poem is at your feet. And you just need to look and see what's at your feet and see what you can make of that. I tell people, this is what poetry is about, is paying attention to where you are. I try to do that in all my poems, and it's helped me. I get a little intellectual once in a while, but my main point is to look at where I am and the people that I'm with, and to write about that.
In every section, you have poodle appear. There's a poem about Poem. Who is the poodle?
Yeah, the poodle it's a character from Faust's. From Goethe's Faust, which is a play about selling your soul to the devil. And so it's a kind of a dark play, let's say. Mm-hmm. And I was reading it to my son when I was 20 years old, And he had just been born, and I was taking care of him, and he didn't care, as I say in one of my poems, he didn't care what I read. So I read Faust to him, and one of the lines in Faust is Wagner, one of the characters, is looking out into the field, and Faust is looking out the field, and Faust says something like, I see something on fire, and it's dragging fire through the leaves and lighting up the fields. And Wagner says to him, all I see is a black poodle. At that moment, I started writing in the name or in the persona of this black poodle so that I could talk about things I didn't always want to talk about, so I could talk about them in ways that I didn't always feel comfortable talking about them. It just seemed to be a different persona for me to write in, and I've done that for now 50 years.
50 years.
Yeah, I have many, many poems that are poodle poems.
Well, read one of those.
Yeah, that'd be great. One of the poems that I'm going to read today, I think, is Poodle Goes to the Avenue, which is, of course, Pacific Avenue, each day to see who's gone missing. I wanted to write about the people down on Pacific Avenue that I knew, and this was written in the 90s. And so a lot of these people, if you remember back then, you'll know them.
Yeah.
And it goes like this. Poodle goes to the avenue each day to see who's gone missing. Pinocchio, the registered sex offender, and the balloon man, tarot man, empathy man, Taco Bell boy, Saxony yak, long-legged, short shorts blonde man who keeps his head down at the margins, the woman who walks all day. She wouldn't have it any other way. The maestro who, with his boombox tucked under his arm, played tapes of his endless piano etudes to the unsuspecting and the uncomprehending. My friend, the polite Vince, who loved to boogie while standing in the doorways. He listened to his Walkman, wearing the new clothes that his parents gave him once a year when he went to the East Coast, I think, on vacation from his schizophrenia. We traded $10 about once a month. He always paid me back, even when he didn't owe me anything. Or Paul with his trout postcards, who fell down that year and almost did not get up. High Five woman who works the crew. She gave me a book that she wrote, which said Appy Book on every page. And Scarves Lady, who preached to the unsaved and spanged the rest, and who was not Cosmic Lady, or the lady with scarves who danced outside while warmth played in front of the Cooper House before the quake. That was when everything changed. That building refused to be demolished without a fight. The new tribes play gypsy music and live in magic buses and have pushed the less charming old men and women to the side streets and into the bushes next to the library. The brutal aisles of the downtown are thick with jealousies and rivalries and heartbreak. The old envelopes are no longer entertaining. These dead letters, their addresses have all been obliterated. But I see some of the disappeared. Of course, the obvious California Slim and saw player Tom. I would like to point out a special case, Ra, the sun god. But how can you point to a negative? He was absent even when he was present. Then he was erased. In a nutshell, he was thrown from the Water Street Bridge and killed maybe 35 years ago. The suspects? The person or persons were male or female, and between the ages of 1 and 100, I believe they are still at large. So if you see them, and you will, please call the local authorities. Ra was the one, do you remember, who stood on bridges or in streets with his head tilted back and his face to the sun, and he stared with the beatific abandon of St. Teresa whilst she lingered in the vice-like grip of her spiritual wedding. His skin became the color of a French roast Tres America coffee bean, but edged in gold with patches of a permanent blush. Then one day he was thrown away.
Wow. That does remind me of, especially the 80s.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this goes back. I looked at it, and when I was going to publish the book, I thought, well, maybe this is out of date. And I thought, no, this is what it's about. And when I write, I often think, I don't write for the moment. I write for moments, yeah. I write for occasions. I write for people's memorials and things like that, which are occasions. But I always try to think, no, does this travel? Does this mean something in the future? And there's just so much about the way we look at people in the community that's still echoed from this poem. And these people are still here.
They are, in many, many variations.
Right.
Let me first remind people that they're listening to KSQD and that you're listening to Exploring Santa Cruz on KSQD. My name is Matilda Rand, your host, and my guest is Tim Fitzmaurice, poet and teacher at UCSC and Salinas Valley State Prison. So let's return to our conversation. Tim, my last program was with Jesse Silva from the Santa Cruz Public Libraries about the importance of books and the library in local jails. What's your take on the subject, especially in relationship to your students at Salinas Valley State Prison?
I've had a bad relationship with the librarian at Salinas Valley State Prison. I mean, she just didn't sort of people don't notice me. I'm not recognized there. And so I'm not in the system. And so, but when I went to San Quentin to teach last fall, I had a really good relationship with the librarian there. And I stayed in the library before I'd go in and teach in the art room. And I read their books. I saw the books that they had. And I said, what kind of books do you need? And he told me, and I was able to collect books and to bring them to San Quentin. And I started to collect books from like Bad Animal or other bookstores in the area or people. They started giving me books, and I'm looking for ways to bring more and more books into the prison because people in prison read. They read a lot. Maybe when they get out, they don't read enough. They probably don't. The fact is, though, in prison, reading is everything, and they love to read all kinds of things, novels and just fantasy novels, things like that, especially things that get them out of their 12x7 into a different world, right? It was an eye-opener to realize I need to bring these books in. And there's so many books out there that are being thrown away these days that it's good for the whole system to do that.
So in that sense, Santa Cruz Public Libraries is doing a great service because they're going every week.
Oh, yeah. It might even be, in a way, more important in county jail. The fact is, county jail has a lot of very short-term type of people as well as long-term. It could actually ignite someone's life. It could give them comfort in a way. The fact is, people in prison need places where they can retreat to and be safe. And it's really hard to be safe in prison or in jail.
That's absolutely true. Now, does it make a difference for your teaching of creative writing when you have students who read a lot? Oh,
yes. And incidentally, they're beginning readers in some ways, especially in prison, where sometimes they left school when they're in the third or fourth grade. And so I get to say, now, think about where you are as a reader, because sometimes they're in very lurid spaces, detective novel kind of spaces, and total things that are of a genre, different types of genre. And I can tell them there are other things as well, things from the cultures that they come from, for instance. I always bring in Latin American, and almost all of my writers in the prison are either Latino or African American, Samoan, things like that. And I always bring work from those cultures, modern work, and it's taught me a heck of a lot about what the modern work is out of Mexico or out of Africa. And so I can move them through and help them and move myself at the same time, because it's really a writing group where we all share and we move ourselves through and we say, look at what this person's doing. Mm-hmm. It's exceptional, and they love to explore that kind of thing.
Now, what approach do you take teaching in general at UCSC, but in particular, I'd like to know about the state prison. What approach do you take, and how do they respond to whatever you're bringing them?
That's a really good question, because I think I was looking back at some earlier structure. I've been doing there for 6 years, right? So I looked at some earlier courses that I did, and I think right from the start, I was influenced by UCSC and by Bill Everson, a poet who was a mentor of mine, Brother Antoninus, some people know him, and he taught a class called Birth of a Poet. And in many ways, that was one of the first books I looked at just a few months after I started working in the prison, and saying, now, maybe I need to think more about how you go through the process of becoming a writer, and how you take, because a writer in prison, to me, these are self-selected 25, 50 people that I get in my class out of 500 on the yard, right? These are the guys that want to pay attention to expressing themselves artistically. And so if I can talk to them about what their responsibility is as a writer, not just what the opportunities are, for instance, to be famous or to sell a book or a movie rights or something like that. These are the things that are in their head, and those are rare things. If I can tell them, look, you have the opportunity here to be the voice of your community, just like all writers do, and the responsibility. It's a heavy responsibility. And so I've seen that happen with writers in my class, where they've taken on that responsibility and thought about, what am I delivering to my children at home? They have children, to my younger relatives. What am I delivering? What am I writing about? And it's changed the way that, they stopped writing about detectives and violence and things like that, right, which I never wanted to publish anyway, and have moved on to other things, but never by force. They just... I think it's by appreciation of everybody else in the room, incidentally, not just me. Right. Everybody in the room.
a little bit before you got to the state prison, I was there and I recorded 11 people who were at that time in the creative writing group. I was amazed with some of the insights that they developed through their writing process. And so I have two pieces that I'd like us to listen to and maybe discuss a little bit.
Excellent.
And the first one is by Nisa, who, no last name because we couldn't do that, but Nisa, who wrote about religion of all topics.
I was a Mormon before I came to prison, and before that I was a Methodist. I was born into a very religious family, with my mother's side being Mormons and my father's side Methodist. I went to Sunday school every Sunday as a child and on into my teenage years. But what I was taught in Sunday school never intrigued my spirituality. I never knew why, but I guess I wasn't ready. There were times when I wanted to embrace Christianity wholeheartedly, but failed to do so. I never could make the spiritual connection. Today, I am a Muslim, one of the three Abrahamic faiths, and I have fully embraced Islam. Now in prison, I tend to think back at why I was not able to embrace Christianity when I was free of these prison walls, and I come up with a definite answer. I was not ready for that step in life. The beautiful thing about this journey of mine is that through Islam, I understand and appreciate Christianity and other faiths better. Through the Quran, God has taught me to accept the Christians as my fellow believers and to understand that we are on a journey with the same goal.
And so this young man takes his life from when he was with two different Christian religions, from his dad and from his mom, and then couldn't connect. And then he gets in prison, gets to learn the Quran,
Right.
and all of a sudden, he not only understands his relationship with religion, but he has a greater understanding of what religion in general does for people.
Mm-hmm. And just you can just hear what happens in this process is the ability to empathize with other people, to make a connection. And in prison, that's forbidden. And so they find in art classes or in writing classes or in a lot of religious groups. My poetry class is not a religious group, but in a lot of religious groups, they find ways of welcoming other people into their circle. And in prison, all those circles are really difficult, impenetrable kinds of networks that can be really difficult to mingle. And when you see it happen in a writing class or you see it in a religion class, you're just astounded by it.
Now, this second piece is a different kind of piece by a man who talks about traveling. Of course, being in prison, he missed that a lot.
There's been much theorizing and debate about time travel, multiverses, and teleportation. I've heard endless discussions of why such things should or should not be possible. The thing is that I've actually found an item that makes it not only possible for me to travel any place at any time, but it can transport me to any place I want to go at a mere second's notice. It will not allow me to change the past or move any physical things from one time or place to another, but I enjoy being able to travel and explore the world and visit people and places that I've not seen in years. It has helped me to become a more well-rounded and better person. I have hopes that it will change my life and my future for the better. Whether or not it will, I'll have to get back to you. For now I'm just loving its magic and power. It holds so much freedom, and for a person living where I am, freedom is something I can always use more of. I'm going to keep experimenting and enjoying toying with my magic item and see what happens the more I use it. Oh, by the way, the item I'm speaking to you of is my pen.
Beautiful. When he says finding freedom in prison, I was reading Mary Oliver, who's a great, great poet, and she has a book about being a poet, and she says that poetry is about emotional freedom. And I talked to my co-writers in the writing group and say that's what we're up to. We can't liberate ourselves from the things that we're in right now. We might be able to in the future, but we can't liberate ourselves. But we can find emotional freedom, and that might even be a key to eventual liberation. And I think she's absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I read it, of course, the whole twist comes at the end where he says, "My pen is the magic item that helps me to travel."
Yeah.
And then when he read it, he told a little bit more about it, and he truly is very interested in what's going on in the world and remembers some things from when he wasn't in prison. And he said, I just had to find some way to get out of my own mind and to get out of these walls.
Right.
And so I thought that was a very useful way for him to calm himself down. He says, it brings me calm when I write about all the places I'd like to visit.
Yeah.
Do you find that in your students?
Oh, definitely. I had a young man come into my group, and he didn't write a thing for 6 months. And the guards at the gate said, you got to kick him out. He's not doing the work. And I said, just let him be. He finally showed me 80 poems he'd written, love poems to no one. He had no person
80?
that he addressed. He had a book, a whole composition book of poems. And he said, this is the only space that I feel safe in prison. This is the only place I feel safe. And it's a space where he's African American, there's Latinos, there's people from North and South and different gangs and all that kind of thing, but he feels safe there. And so I think that's what art can do. It can give you that sense of different territory. And I want to thank the William James Association, Laurie Brooks, and all the people that helped me to be a teacher in prison. And we just went to something where a former incarcerated person said, my paintbrush is my magic wand.
Yes.
And so that reminds me a lot of that.
From that same thing.
Yeah.
Now, did you bring any writing of your students?
I did, and I really want to say something about it. I have too much probably, but the things I have are not like the things that you just read, because they tend to be the poems that people wrote, but some of them do have that quality. And one of them I helped get published in the Harvard Journal of African American Literature, and it's called Caged Bird by Brandon Dixon. It's all these are by permission. Caged Bird, molded from the black land of clay on a crisp summer day, seeking joy in a state of decay. These penitentiary gates predict the ruin of the Golden State. The years spent in prison is growing old, making men bitter and distant. The stench of rage smolders in the brutal, intoxicating air, frisking the noses of castaway men. Pride once high. This is why the caged birds can't fly. The roots of shadows opened his eyes to a host of dry leaves, fake smiles and silent stares, one place but still a maze among the many graves. The new slaves in these stockade plantations stretched across the nation. The representation of his incarceration don't believe in a rehabilitation. This is why the caged bird can't fly. The eyes of the blackbird imagining flying above the sharp razor wires, on fire running toward freedom, as the moonlight burns his courage, being chastised by the supreme being of his dreams. Many things seem to be true when one is sleeping, sweeping across the inaccessible landscape, with faith chasing an illusion, with conclusion of a lie. This is why the caged bird can't fly. Year after year, bad fortune lurks about him. As he sits, he hears torture of violence near him, men beating on steel doors, screaming for liberty, shackled to concrete, defeated by loneliness. Strictly guided by barcode, bitterness of the blackbird in solitude gives way to a black attitude. The magnitude of idle years piled up give reason to the man hanging in the cell hoping to fly when he die. This is why the caged bird can't fly. And that was a very negative poem, but Dixon taught himself how to write. He taught himself how to read in prison, and you can hear him borrowing from Maya Angelou and from other sources, and William Blake, in fact, and just it's really stunning. And he got that from books that people brought from outside and gave to him about poetry, and he read them. He taught himself how to read them, and he's just a wonderful person. Do I have time for one more?
One more, yes.
One more, really short one. This is a completely different kind of thing. I walk in there, here's a guy who's committed double murder, and he's in forever. His name is Roosevelt. He's one of my best friends now after 6 years. And he handed me a poem, and I thought the poems would sound like something from a person in prison. And then I realized I didn't know what I couldn't predict. So he wrote this poem, and you can hear he's making up words as he goes along. Music roars through the living room speaker as if it's our birthright to boogie and scream. The scene would alert with vibrating walls and singing family members romped up in the front, entering the circle shouting, big mouth, everybody clapping their hands, feet finding their magical steps. My younger brother, 9 years old, and a natural class clown, jumps into the center of the family-made dancing circle, reveling in the imaginary spotlight that romances his attention. You talk too much, homeboy. You never shut up, he shouts as the lyrics flip from tune to tune. Saturday morning gigging erases the problems of the week, and the spirit is free. Music has always been an escape from era to era. Each genre passes the torch of the two-step and screaming, my turn. A fan of the competition, rotate dancing places with Lil Bro. I'm on. 1984 wasn't bad. The innocence of being 10 and allowed to shout, give it to me.
Wow.
The stunning exuberance in the opportunity to say things that you can't say on a prison yard. Being 10 years old again, and realizing there was a time when it was all good. It was all good for a moment.
It's amazing. Now, you mostly teach poetry, or do you do creative
Oh,
writing?
no,
on genre?
everything. Yeah, they want to tell stories mostly, so it's, a lot of it's story writing.
Yeah.
Because poetry it has too many rules, to tell you the truth. I kind of stay away from it as being the goal. I want the goal to be their letter writing, because they're writing letters to their families, and legal letters even, and they're writing memoirs, and they're writing stories. And I tend to focus on just being the storyteller.
Perfect. I know we ran out of time, but I'd like listeners to know that if they want to contact you, then they can email you at timfitz, TIMFITZ, timfitz@ucsc.edu, or they can go to @Fitz, FITZ, poet on Twitter.
Right. And put Exploring Santa Cruz in the subject area, so I'll make sure I know it's coming from here.
Okay.
And I'll send you a book. I'll send you a book and just ask for a donation to the prison.
Because your book is not for sale for profit.
It's for sale at Bookshop Santa Cruz. It's for sale at Bad Animal. But from me, I just want people to donate to the prison work.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you, Tim. I know we totally ran out of time. And I want to remind people that you have been listening to Exploring Santa Cruz with Tim Fitzmaurice, poet and writing teacher at UCSC and Salinas Valley State Prison. This program will be on ksqd.org/exploring-Santa-Cruz in a couple of days.